The Wright brothers flew the first airplane in 1903. It lasted 12 seconds. Less than 30 years after that first flight, we had our first hijacking. But picking the first hijacking isn't that simple. It depends on what you called a hijacking. Is it a passenger pulling a gun mid-flight? A pilot forced down at gunpoint? A robbery at 5,000 feet? Today, we're going to look at 3 incidents, 3 very different crimes, and by the end, you can decide which one was truly the first. The year was 1919. World War I had just ended, and a Hungarian aristocrat named Baron Franz Nopcsa was in serious trouble. Hungary had just gone through a communist revolution. The new government was hunting down nobles, and just 1 year earlier, the royal Russian family had been executed by their own communist government. He wasn't going to wait and find out if Hungary would do the same to him. Franz Nopcsa wasn't just some desperate nobleman. He had been a spy for the Austro-Hungarian Empire during World War I, so he knew he needed to get out fast. There was just one problem. The new government wouldn't give him a passport, so he did something no one had ever done before. He forged government documents. He created fake papers that authorized him to take a military aircraft and its pilot for an official flight from Budapest to a city called Sopron. The pilot didn't question it. They took off, but Sopron was never the real destination. About halfway through the flight, Franz reached into his coat and pulled out a pistol. He pointed it at the pilot and told him to change course. New destination, Vienna, Austria. The pilot complied. They landed in Vienna. Franz escaped. The Guinness World Records officially recognizes this as the first hijacking of an aircraft in flight in history. One small caveat. We know about it because Franz wrote about it in his own memoirs. There were no newspaper reports from the time confirming it, but Guinness stood by it. Franz Nopcsa died in 1933, never charged, never arrested for the hijacking. He had escaped justice just as cleanly as he had escaped Hungary. But the next hijacking looked nothing like the first. February 21st, 1931, Arequipa, Peru. An American pilot named Byron Rickards had just landed his Ford Trimotor, a large 3-engine passenger plane, after a routine flight from Lima, Peru. The moment the plane touched down, he looked out the window. He was completely surrounded by armed soldiers. They told him he was now a prisoner of a revolutionary organization. Peru was in the middle of a political uprising. A group of rebels had taken control of the city, and they wanted Rickards to do 2 things: drop propaganda leaflets from the air over Peruvian cities and fly their people where they needed to go. Rickards refused. He didn't negotiate. He didn't comply. He just said no. And so began one of the strangest standoffs in aviation history. For 10 days, Rickards sat there, grounded, guarded, held captive, refusing every demand. Then, on the 10th day, the revolutionaries came back with news. Their uprising had succeeded. The revolution was over. They had won. And because they had won, they didn't need him anymore. They offered him a deal: fly one of their men to Lima, and he was free. Rickards agreed, and just like that, it was over. Guinness World Records lists this as the first recorded hijacking of an aircraft on the ground, technically separate from Baron Franz's incident, which had happened mid-flight. Fortunately, both times everyone survived, but our next story had a very different ending. July 16th, 1948, Macao, a small Portuguese colony on the coast of China. A Cathay Pacific seaplane called Miss Macao was about to take off for Hong Kong. It was a 20-minute flight, 23 passengers and 3 crew members, 26 people total. The passengers were wealthy. They always were on this route. Miss Macao was famous for carrying rich business people and gold bullion back and forth between the 2 cities. Everyone knew it. 4 men on board that day knew it too. They weren't terrorists. They weren't political rebels. They were 4 ordinary men. 3 of them farmers from a nearby island, who had spent months planning a robbery. They had sold everything they owned to buy the tickets. Shortly after takeoff, one of them stormed the cockpit, but the pilots fought back. Both the captain and the first officer resisted violently. Passengers joined in. A brutal struggle broke out inside the plane. During the fight, the captain was shot. With no one in control of the aircraft, Miss Macao went into a dive. The impact was catastrophic. The nose tore off. The tail was ripped away. 25 of the 26 people on board were killed. 1 person survived. A fisherman spotted a man in the water that night wearing a life jacket with a broken leg. He was pulled out and brought to a hospital in Macao. His name was Wong Yu. He was 24 years old, a rice farmer, and investigators quickly realized his story didn't add up. How had he survived when no one else had? Why had he already been wearing a life jacket before impact? Wong Yu eventually confessed. He was the leader of the entire operation. He had jumped through an emergency exit just before the plane hit the water. The robbery had failed. 25 people were dead. 3 of his own accomplices were among them. Wong Yu was charged. But what happened to him after that remained unclear. His fate and whatever sentence he received was never made fully public. This crime was so new, so unimaginable, that nobody even had a word for it yet. 3 incidents, 3 very different crimes. A nobleman with a forged document and a pistol. A pilot who refused to move for 10 days. And a robbery that ended in disaster. Which one was the first real hijacking? That depends on how you see it. Let me know in the comment section what you think.